The emergency beacon had been broadcasting for 37 cycles, its faint signal pulsing into the endless black of space like the dying heartbeat of a wounded animal. Commander Zara Veltar of the Kepler Coalition's Deep Space Reconnaissance vessel Silent Dawn pressed her scaled palm against the cracked viewport, watching another piece of debris tumble past in the void. Her ship was dying around her, and she was powerless to stop it. The attack had come without warning. The Hegemony's Shadow Fleet had emerged from hyperspace like a pack of predators, their sleek black vessels moving with deadly precision. Zara's crew of 12 had fought bravely, but the Silent Dawn was an exploration vessel, not a warship. They had managed to damage one of the attackers before their weapons systems failed completely, but it hadn't been enough. Now she was alone. The ship's life support systems wheezed and groaned around her, struggling to maintain atmospheric pressure in the sections that weren't completely compromised. Half the vessel was open to vacuum, sealed off by emergency bulkheads that wouldn't hold forever. Her crew lay dead in the medical bay, wrapped in whatever material she could find. She had said words over each of them in the traditional way of her people, but the ceremonies felt hollow in the metallic confines of the damaged ship. Zara's species, the Valkyrie, were known throughout the galaxy for their resilience and adaptability. Their homeworld of Kepler Prime was a harsh place of extreme temperatures and toxic storms, which had forged them into natural explorers and survivors. But even Valkyrie endurance had limits, and Zara could feel hers approaching fast. The food synthesizers had failed on the 15th cycle. She had been rationing the emergency supplies since then, but there was perhaps enough for another 10 cycles if she was careful. Water was less of a concern thanks to the recycling systems that were still functional, but without power to run the heating elements, she was slowly freezing to death. The worst part wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was the silence. For someone who had spent her entire adult life surrounded by the constant chatter of crew members, the hum of active systems, and the background noise of a living ship, the oppressive quiet was almost unbearable. Sometimes she found herself talking aloud just to hear a voice, even if it was only her own. She recited technical manuals, told herself stories from her childhood, and even sang the old exploration songs that her father had taught her before she joined the Coalition fleet. But, mostly, she monitored the beacon and waited for a miracle that seemed less likely with each passing hour. The Coalition knew roughly where the Silent Dawn had been patrolling, but this sector was vast and largely unexplored. They might find the wreckage eventually, but Zara doubted she would live long enough to see rescue ships arrive. The nearest Coalition outpost was weeks away even at maximum hyperspace velocity, and she had no way to know if her distress signal was even being received. On the 42nd cycle, something changed. Zara was dozing fitfully in the command chair, wrapped in every piece of fabric she could find, when the communications array suddenly crackled to life. She jerked awake, her heart pounding as she stared at the display. Someone was trying to establish contact. The signal was weak and filled with static, but it was definitely artificial in origin. More importantly, it seemed to be responding to her beacon rather than simply passing through the area. Zara's hands shook as she activated the receiver and boosted the gain as high as the damaged systems would allow. "Unknown vessel, this is Coalition ship Silent Dawn," she transmitted, her voice hoarse from disuse. "We are in distress and require immediate assistance. Please respond." For long moments, there was nothing but static. Then, a voice emerged from the interference, speaking in heavily accented Coalition standard that she had never heard before. "Silent Dawn, this is the independent trader Lucky Strike. We received your distress beacon and are moving to intercept. What is your status?" Zara nearly wept with relief. She keyed the transmitter again, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Thank the void you're there. My ship is severely damaged and I'm the sole survivor. Life support is failing and I estimate perhaps 8 cycles of supplies remaining." There was a pause, then the voice returned with what sounded like barely controlled urgency. "Copy that, Silent Dawn. We're pushing our engines hard and should reach your position in approximately 6 hours. Can you maintain life support that long?" 6 hours. Zara looked around the bridge at the failing systems and the frost that had begun forming on the bulkheads. The environmental controls were losing the battle against the cold of space, and she could see her breath misting in the air. But 6 hours was manageable. It had to be. Affirmative, lucky strike. I'll be here. Good. Stay on this channel and keep talking to me. I want to monitor your condition. There was something in the stranger's voice that Zara couldn't quite identify. It wasn't just professional concern, there was something more personal about it, as if her survival mattered to this unknown pilot for reasons beyond simple humanitarian duty. "What's your name?" she asked. "Captain Marcus Chen," came the reply. "And you are?" "Commander Zara Veltar, Kepler Coalition Deep Space Reconnaissance Division." "Captain Chen, what ship type is the Lucky Strike?" "I'm not familiar with your vessel configuration on sensors." Another pause. "It's unique. Custom built. You'll see when I get there. For now, just focus on staying warm and keeping those life support systems running." Over the next several hours, Marcus Chen proved to be an excellent conversationalist. He asked about her mission, her crew, and the circumstances of the attack. Zara found herself sharing more than she had intended, talking about her fears and the weight of being the sole survivor. Chen listened without judgment and offered words of encouragement that seemed to come from genuine experience with loss and hardship. "You said you're not coalition," Zara mentioned during one exchange. "What brings an independent trader out to this sector?" "Long story," Chen replied with what sounded like a chuckle. "Let's just say I go where others won't. This part of space has been getting dangerous lately with all the hegemony activity, but that also means there are opportunities for someone willing to take risks. And you're willing to take risks. More than most people think is sane, probably. But sometimes taking risks means being in the right place to help someone who needs it." As the lucky strike drew closer, Zara began to detect it on her damaged sensors. What she saw made her question whether the stress and cold were affecting her mind. The vessel approaching her position was unlike anything in her extensive knowledge of galactic ship designs. It was roughly the size of a coalition frigate but had an angular, aggressive appearance that spoke of advanced engineering and military-grade systems. More puzzling was the fact that her sensors couldn't get a clear reading on its composition or energy signatures. The ship seemed to shift and blur at the edges, as if it existed slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. Most strange of all, there appeared to be weapon emplacements that her computer couldn't classify, along with drive signatures that registered as completely unknown technology. "Captain Chen," she transmitted, "I'm picking you up on sensors now, but I'm getting some unusual readings from your vessel. Is your ship of alien manufacture?" The silence stretched long enough that Zara began to worry she had lost contact. Then, Chen's voice returned, sounding more serious than before. "Commander Veltar, what I'm about to tell you might be difficult to believe. My species isn't part of the coalition, and we're not registered with the galactic databases. We're newcomers to this part of space." Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the failing life support. "Newcomers from where?" "A place called Earth. We call ourselves humans." The name meant nothing to Zara, but the implications were staggering. An unknown species with advanced technology operating in coalition space? This could be either a remarkable first contact situation or a potential security threat of the highest order. Her training told her to be cautious, but her desperate circumstances left her with little choice but to trust this stranger who had come to her aid. "Humans," she repeated slowly. "And you're willing to help a coalition officer despite being unknown to our governments?" "Commander, I don't care about politics or interstellar relations right now. You're in trouble, and I'm in a position to help. That's enough for me." The simple honesty in his voice surprised her. In Zara's experience, first contact situations were complex affairs involving diplomatic protocols and careful negotiations. But Marcus Chen seemed to approach it with a straightforward morality that put immediate humanitarian concerns above larger strategic considerations. "I'm grateful, Captain. But I should warn you that once we make contact, both our governments will likely want extensive debriefings about this encounter." "I figured as much. We'll deal with that when it comes." Right now, let's focus on keeping you alive. The lucky strike was close enough now that Zara could see it through her viewport, and the sight took her breath away. The vessel was beautiful in a predatory way, its hull a deep metallic gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange markings covered its surface, and she could see the subtle glow of energy fields that her instruments couldn't identify. Most impressive were its size and apparent firepower. This wasn't a simple trader vessel, it was clearly designed for combat operations in hostile space. The fact that its captain was willing to risk such an advanced ship to rescue a stranded coalition officer spoke well of human character, but it also raised questions about what humans might want in return. Silent Dawn, this is Lucky Strike. I'm moving into position to dock with your vessel. Your ship's pretty banged up, but I can see an intact docking port on your port side. Can you extend the docking tube? Zara checked her systems and felt her heart sink. Negative, Lucky Strike. The docking mechanisms are offline and I don't have power to extend the tube. No problem. I'll handle it from my end. Just make sure that airlock is sealed and ready to receive visitors. Zara watched in fascination as the human ship maneuvered with impossible precision, its thrusters firing in complex patterns that brought it into perfect alignment with her damaged vessel. She could see mechanical arms extending from its hull, and what appeared to be a flexible docking tube that reached out to connect with her airlock. The connection was made with barely a tremor, and moments later her airlock sensors indicated a solid seal and breathable atmosphere on the other side. Zara made her way carefully through the damaged corridors, noting how the artificial gravity fluctuated with each step. By the time she reached the airlock, she was breathing hard and her vision was swimming from the cold and exhaustion. The inner airlock door cycled open, and Zara got her first look at a human. Marcus Chen was shorter than she had expected, probably coming up to about her shoulder. His species appeared to be bipedal mammals with smooth skin and fine hair covering only the top of their heads and parts of their faces. He wore a dark blue uniform that looked both practical and well-made, and his brown eyes held an expression of concerned competence that immediately put her at ease. What struck her most was how expressive his face was. Valkyrie emotions were typically displayed through scale color changes and posture, but humans seemed to wear their feelings openly in their facial features. She could see relief, determination, and genuine warmth in his expression as he stepped through the airlock. "Commander Veltar," he said, extending his hand in what she recognized as a greeting gesture from his earlier description. "I'm glad we made it in time." Zara reached out to clasp his hand, noting the surprising strength in his grip and the warmth of his skin. "Captain Chen. I cannot adequately express my gratitude." "No need," he replied with what she was learning to recognize as a human smile. "Let's get you somewhere warm and fed, then we can worry about the formal thanks." As Marcus led her through the docking tube and onto his ship, Zara marveled at the technology surrounding her. The Lucky Strike's corridors were wider than those on coalition vessels, with a utilitarian aesthetic that spoke of function over form. But the underlying systems were clearly more advanced than anything she had encountered, from the smooth hum of the artificial gravity generators to the subtle energy fields that seemed to reinforce the hull structure. "Impressive vessel," she commented as they walked toward what she assumed was the living quarters. "Thank you. She served me well in some difficult situations." "How long has your species had spaceflight capability?" Marcus paused at a junction in the corridor, and Zara caught something guarded in his expression. "Not as long as you might think. Humans are relatively new to interstellar travel." There was clearly more to that story, but Zara's exhaustion was catching up with her now that the immediate crisis was over. The warmth of the human ship was almost overwhelming after so many cycles in the gradually cooling wreckage of her own vessel, and she found herself swaying on her feet. Marcus noticed immediately and moved to steady her. "Easy there. You've been through hell. Let's get you to the medical bay and check you over, then we'll find you a place to rest." The medical bay was another revelation. The equipment was unfamiliar but clearly sophisticated, with diagnostic systems that seemed to work on principles she didn't recognize. Marcus ran several scans while explaining what he was doing, his manner competent and reassuring. "Good news," he announced after reviewing the results. You're dehydrated and malnourished, but there's no permanent damage. A few days of proper food and rest should have you back to full strength. What about my ship? Marcus's expression grew more serious. I'm sorry, Commander. The Silent Dawn is beyond salvage. The structural damage is too extensive, and most of your critical systems are offline. We'll need to transfer anything important to my ship before the hull breaches completely. Zara nodded, having expected as much. The loss of her vessel was painful, but it was nothing compared to the loss of her crew. At least their sacrifice wouldn't be completely meaningless if she lived to report on the hegemony's activities in this sector. What's our next move, Captain? First, you recover. Then, we figure out how to get you back to Coalition space safely. This sector isn't exactly friendly territory right now. The hegemony forces that attacked us might still be in the area. They might, Marcus agreed. But they'll have to go through me to get to you, and that's not going to be as easy as they might think. There was something in his tone that made Zara look at him more carefully. Despite his friendly demeanor and obvious concern for her welfare, there was a hardness underneath that spoke of combat experience and capabilities that went far beyond those of a simple trader. Captain Chen, what exactly is the Lucky Strike? And what are humans doing in this part of space? Marcus was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Those are fair questions, Commander, and you deserve honest answers. But they're also complicated answers that might be better discussed after you've had some rest and food. Zara wanted to press the issue, but her exhaustion was making it difficult to think clearly. The warmth and safety of the human ship was having a profound effect on her, and, for the first time in over 40 cycles, she felt herself relaxing completely. All right, she agreed. But I will want those answers. And you'll get them, Marcus promised. For now, let me show you to quarters where you can get some real sleep. The room he led her to was small but comfortable, with what appeared to be a standard humanoid sleeping arrangement and basic amenities. As Zara settled onto the surprisingly soft bedding, she reflected on the extraordinary turn her situation had taken. Hours ago, she had been certain she would die alone in the wreckage of her ship. Now she was safe aboard a vessel belonging to an unknown species that had appeared out of nowhere to rescue her. The humans represented either a remarkable opportunity for peaceful first contact or a potential threat that could reshape the balance of power in this part of the galaxy. But, as sleep finally claimed her, Zara found herself hoping it would be the former. There was something about Marcus Chen and his willingness to risk everything to help a stranger that spoke well of his species' character. Whatever secrets the humans were hiding, she sensed they might prove to be valuable allies in the challenging times ahead. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was the steady glow of the ship's systems around her, a reassuring reminder that she was no longer alone in the void. Zara woke to the gentle hum of alien technology and the unfamiliar sensation of being truly warm for the first time in weeks. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, then, the events of the previous day came flooding back. The human ship. Marcus Chen. Her rescue from what had seemed like certain death. She stretched carefully, noting that her body felt significantly better after proper rest in a heated environment. The chronic ache in her joints from the cold was gone, and her mind felt clearer than it had since the attack. Rising from the sleeping platform, she made her way to the small washing facility attached to her quarters, marveling again at the advanced but unfamiliar technology. The water was hot and plentiful, another luxury she had almost forgotten existed. As she cleaned herself and tended to the minor injury she had sustained during the attack on her ship, Zara considered her situation more objectively than she had been able to do while fighting for survival. She was now aboard the vessel of an unknown alien species that possessed technology seemingly more advanced than anything in Coalition space. The captain had been nothing but helpful and respectful, but the very existence of humans raised serious questions about galactic security and the balance of power between the Coalition and the hegemony. More immediately concerning was her complete dependence on Marcus Chen's goodwill. If the humans proved hostile or had ulterior motives for the rescue, she was in no position to resist or escape. But something in the human captain's manner suggested that her concerns might be unfounded. A soft chime from the door interrupted her thoughts. Commander Veltar, came Marcus's voice through the communication system. I hate to disturb your rest, but we have a situation developing that you should be aware of. Zara quickly finished dressing in the cleaned and repaired uniform that had somehow appeared while she slept. Coming, Captain. She found Marcus in what appeared to be the ship's command center, a space that was both familiar and alien in its layout. The basic concepts were recognizable, with command stations arranged around a central display area, but the technology itself was unlike anything she had encountered. Holographic displays floated freely in the air, and the control interfaces seemed to respond to both touch and gesture commands. What's the situation? She asked, moving to stand beside Marcus at the central command station. 3 hegemony cruisers just dropped out of hyperspace about 4 light hours from our position, Marcus replied, indicating the tactical display. They're conducting what looks like a systematic search pattern. Zara studied the display, noting the movement patterns of the enemy vessels. They're looking for survivors from my ship. The hegemony doesn't like to leave loose ends, especially when it comes to coalition intelligence officers. Can they detect us at this range? Normally, yes. Hegemony sensors are quite sophisticated. Zara paused, studying the readings more carefully. But they don't seem to be tracking us directly. Are you running some kind of stealth system? Marcus's expression became guarded. Something like that. The Lucky Strike has certain capabilities that make it difficult to detect. Before Zara could ask for clarification, another alarm sounded. A new contact appeared on the display, much closer than the others. Damn, Marcus muttered. Fast attack craft, probably launched from one of the cruisers. It's on an intercept course. Zara felt her stomach tighten as she recognized the sensor profile. That's a shadow fighter, one of the hegemony's elite units. Highly maneuverable, heavily armed, and piloted by their best combat operatives. If it's detected us, then we're about to find out what the Lucky Strike can really do, Marcus said grimly. His hands moved across the control interfaces with practiced efficiency, and Zara felt the ship's systems shifting to what was obviously a combat configuration. Captain, with respect, this isn't a trader vessel, is it? Marcus glanced at her, and she saw a moment of calculation in his eyes before he seemed to reach a decision. No, Commander, it's not. The Lucky Strike is a deep reconnaissance and interdiction vessel, designed for operations in hostile territory. Reconnaissance for whom? That's complicated. But right now, our priority is staying alive long enough for me to explain it properly. The shadow fighter was closing rapidly, its energy signature growing stronger on the sensors. Zara watched with professional interest as Marcus prepared his ship for combat, noting the smoothness and efficiency of the vessel's systems. Whatever technology the humans possessed, it was clearly battle-tested and reliable. Incoming transmission, Marcus announced. They're hailing us. Put it through, Zara said. I'll handle this. The communication channel opened with a burst of static, then cleared to reveal the angular helmet of a hegemony pilot. The voice that emerged was filtered and mechanical, stripped of all emotion by the combat suits systems. Unknown vessel, you are in violation of hegemony territorial claims. Reduce speed and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Zara stepped forward where the transmission pickup would capture her image. This is Commander Zara Veltar of the Kepler Coalition. These are not hegemony territorial waters under any recognized interstellar treaty. The pilot's helmet turned slightly, and she could sense surprise even through the mechanical filter. Commander Veltar is listed as killed in action following the destruction of the vessel Silent Dawn. Identify yourself properly. I am exactly who I claim to be, pilot. And I am very much alive despite your force's best efforts. There was a pause, then the transmission cut off abruptly. Marcus looked at the tactical display and swore under his breath. He's powering weapons and calling for backup. The cruisers are changing course to intercept. Can we outrun them? Probably, but that would just confirm that we have something to hide. And it would leave the question of your survival unresolved, which means they'd keep hunting for you. Zara looked at him sharply. What are you suggesting? Marcus's expression was grim but determined. I'm suggesting we end this here and now. The hegemony has been getting too aggressive in this sector anyway, and it's time someone reminded them that there are consequences for attacking coalition vessels. Captain, that fighter alone outguns most coalition frigates. And there are 3 cruisers backing it up. Trust me, Commander. The Lucky Strike has a few surprises. Before Zara could respond, the shadow fighter opened fire. Brilliant energy beams lanced through space toward their position, and she braced for impact. Instead, the beams seemed to bend around the human ship, deflected by invisible barriers that registered as impossible energy readings on her mental model of known physics. Shields holding, Marcus announced calmly. Returning fire. The human ship's response was devastating. Weapons that Zara couldn't classify unleashed streams of energy that tore through the shadow fighter's defenses like they were paper. The hegemony craft tried to evade, its pilot clearly skilled and experienced, but the human weapons tracked with inhuman precision. The fighter exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its destruction so sudden and complete that Zara could hardly believe what she had witnessed. How? She began, then stopped as she saw Marcus's expression. Human technology has some advantages, he said quietly. We've had to learn to be very good at protecting ourselves in a universe full of hostile neighbors. The tactical display showed the 3 hegemony cruisers accelerating toward their position, their energy signatures spiking as they charged their main weapon systems. Zara calculated the odds and felt her scales shift to the pale color that indicated fear among her people. Captain, I appreciate what you did, but 3 cruisers is too much for any single ship. We should run. Marcus studied the display for a moment, then shook his head. No. Running just means they'll be back with more ships and better preparation. Sometimes the only way to buy peace is to demonstrate that aggression carries an unacceptable cost. He activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We are engaging multiple hostile vessels to protect our guest and send a message about human resolve. Battle stations. Zara was startled to hear responses from other crew members. During her rescue and recovery, she had assumed Marcus was operating alone, but apparently the Lucky Strike carried a full complement of personnel. The voices that acknowledged his orders were crisp and professional, speaking the same accented coalition standard that Marcus used. How many crew do you have? She asked. 43, including myself. All volunteers for deep space operations. The first hegemony cruiser came into weapons range and immediately opened fire with its main batteries. The energy beams were massive, designed to crack the hulls of capital ships, but once again they seemed to bend around the human vessel without effect. Impossible, Zara breathed. No shield technology can deflect that much energy. You're right, Marcus agreed. These aren't exactly shields in the conventional sense. The Lucky Strike's return fire was precise and devastating. Instead of the broad energy beams favored by most galactic civilizations, the human weapons fired what appeared to be highly focused streams of exotic particles that punched through the cruiser's shields and armor with minimal effort. Secondary explosions blossomed along the enemy vessel's hull as internal systems overloaded and failed. Target 1 is crippled, reported a female voice from somewhere on the bridge. Engines offline, weapons down, life support failing. Cease fire on Target 1, Marcus ordered. Focus on the remaining hostiles. The second and third cruisers had spread apart, trying to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. It was a sound tactical approach that should have overwhelmed any single opponent, but the human ship seemed to dance between their weapons fire with impossible agility. Zara watched in fascination as the vessel's artificial gravity compensated perfectly for the extreme maneuvering, keeping the crew comfortable even as the ship pulled accelerations that should have turned them into paste against the bulkheads. Captain, she said during a brief lull in the engagement, what you're showing me here, this level of technology is beyond anything in known galactic civilization. Where did your species develop these capabilities? Marcus was silent for a moment, focused on the tactical display as his ship engaged the 2 remaining cruisers. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested painful memories. Humanity had a very difficult introduction to the galactic community, Commander. We learned early that superior technology is often the only thing that keeps a species from being enslaved or exterminated by its neighbors. One of the remaining hegemony cruisers made a fatal error, turning to present its broadside in an attempt to bring more weapons to bear. The human ship's response was immediate and overwhelming. A single focused beam of energy, different from the others Zara had seen, struck the cruiser's main reactor housing. The explosion was visible even at their current distance, a brief star that faded to leave only expanding debris. "Dear Void," Zara whispered. "You destroyed it completely." "The captain chose to continue the engagement," Marcus said flatly. "I gave them multiple opportunities to withdraw." The final hegemony cruiser apparently reached the same conclusion Zara had about the futility of continuing the fight. It ceased fire and began broadcasting on all frequencies. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Throck of the hegemony cruiser Domination. We are withdrawing from this engagement. Do not pursue." Marcus considered for a moment, then activated the communication channel. "Captain Throck, this is Captain Marcus Chin of the independent vessel Lucky Strike. Your withdrawal is accepted. Be advised that attacks on coalition personnel in this sector will be met with similar responses. Acknowledged, Captain Chen. We will report this encounter to our superiors. Please do. And, Captain? The next time hegemony forces encounter human vessels, I recommend a more diplomatic approach." The surviving cruiser and its crippled companion began withdrawing from the area, their hyperspace engines spooling up for departure. Within minutes, they had vanished, leaving the human ship alone in the emptiness of space. Zara stared at the tactical display, trying to process what she had just witnessed. A single human vessel had engaged 4 hegemony warships and destroyed 2 of them while sustaining no apparent damage. The implications were staggering. "Captain Chen," she said carefully, "I think it's time for those answers you promised." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "Yes, I think it is. But, first, let me ask you something, Commander. What do you know about the history of first contact between galactic civilizations? The standard protocols and procedures, mostly. Why? Because humanity's first contact with the galactic community wasn't peaceful exploration or diplomatic outreach. We were discovered by slavers." Zara felt her scales shift color involuntarily. Slavery was one of the most serious crimes recognized by galactic law, though enforcement was often problematic in the outer sectors. 3 years ago, Marcus continued, a species called the Kethvar found Earth and decided that humans would make excellent servants. They attacked without warning, capturing several million people before we managed to mount an effective resistance. "But, you obviously won," Zara observed. "Eventually. But, the cost was enormous, and the experience taught us some hard lessons about how the galaxy really works. The strong prey on the weak, and the only thing that protects a species is the ability to make aggression too expensive to be worthwhile." Marcus gestured to the displays around them. "Everything you've seen here is the result of 3 years of desperate innovation and development. Human technology advanced more in those 3 years than in the previous century, driven by the knowledge that our survival as a free species depended on our ability to defend ourselves. And now you're operating in coalition space," Zara said, beginning to understand the larger picture. "We're operating everywhere we can, gathering intelligence and establishing relationships. The galaxy is changing, Commander, and humanity needs allies who share our values of freedom and self-determination." Zara was quiet for a moment, absorbing the implications. "Is that why you rescued me? To establish contact with the coalition?" Marcus looked at her directly, and she saw complete honesty in his expression. "No, Commander. I rescued you because leaving someone to die in the void when I could help would be wrong. The political implications are secondary to basic human morality." There was something in his tone that convinced Zara of his sincerity. Whatever agenda humanity might have, Marcus Chen's actions had been motivated by genuine humanitarian concern. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we get you back to coalition space safely, and you make your report to your superiors. What they choose to do with the information about humanity is up to them. And if they decide that humans represent a threat to be neutralized? Marcus's expression hardened slightly. Then, they'll learn the same lesson the Kethvar and the hegemony have learned. Humanity is done being anyone's victim. Zara studied his face, seeing the determination and steel underneath his friendly exterior. The humans were clearly a formidable species, but their technology wasn't what impressed her most. It was their willingness to risk everything to help a stranger and their refusal to be intimidated by superior numbers or established power structures. Captain Chen, she said formally, I would like to request permission to send a message to Coalition Command. I think my superiors need to know that humanity exists, and that we may have found the allies we need to stand against the growing hegemony threat. Marcus smiled, and Zara was struck again by how expressive human faces were. Permission granted, Commander. And, thank you. For what? For giving humanity a chance to prove we can be trusted friends rather than feared enemies. As Zara began composing her message to Coalition Command, she reflected on the extraordinary turn her mission had taken. She had started as a reconnaissance officer gathering intelligence on hegemony activities. Now she found herself serving as humanity's first official contact with the galactic community. It was a responsibility she didn't take lightly, but she was hopeful about the outcome. If the rest of humanity shared Marcus Chen's values and capabilities, the balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift dramatically. And, for the first time in years, that shift might actually favor the forces of freedom and justice. The message she sent would change everything, but, as she watched Marcus and his crew working with quiet efficiency to prepare for the journey back to Coalition space, Zara felt confident that the change would be for the better. The journey to Coalition space took 4 days, during which Zara learned more about humanity than she had expected possible. Marcus had given her free run of the ship, introducing her to his crew and allowing her to observe their operations with minimal restriction. What she discovered both amazed and concerned her. The humans were undeniably advanced, but their technology seemed to follow different principles than the rest of galactic civilization. Where most species had developed along predictable paths of energy manipulation and materials science, humanity appeared to have leaped ahead through breakthrough innovations in fundamental physics and engineering. Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's chief science officer, explained some of the basics during a tour of the engineering sections. We had to get creative fast, she said, gesturing to the exotic machinery around them. When the Kethvar attacked, our conventional technology was centuries behind galactic standards. So we stopped trying to catch up and started looking for completely different approaches. This gravity manipulation system, for instance, Sarah continued, indicating a device that hummed with barely contained energy. Most species use brute force gravitic generators that require enormous amounts of power. We developed a method that works with natural spacetime curvature instead of fighting against it. Zara studied the readings on her handheld scanner, noting energy signatures that shouldn't have been possible according to established physics. How did you achieve these breakthroughs so quickly? Sarah's expression darkened. Necessity. When your entire species faces extinction or slavery, you find ways to think beyond conventional limitations. We had access to captured Kethvar technology for reverse engineering, but, more importantly, we had millions of brilliant minds working toward a single goal with unlimited resources and no bureaucratic restrictions. The tour continued through sections of the ship that seemed to exist purely for research and development. Laboratories filled with equipment Zara couldn't identify, workshops where crew members were apparently designing improvements to already advanced systems, and computer cores that processed information using quantum mechanical principles she didn't fully understand. Are all human vessels this advanced? She asked. The Lucky Strike is one of our more capable ships, admitted Lieutenant Commander James Morrison, the vessel's tactical officer. But every human ship carries technology that would be considered revolutionary by galactic standards. We learned early that half measures weren't going to keep us alive. Morrison led her to the Weapons Control Center, where she got her first detailed look at the systems that had so easily destroyed the hegemony vessels. The technology was elegant in its complexity, using principles that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of energy conservation. The main armament fires concentrated streams of exotic matter, Morrison explained. The particles are created using controlled antimatter reactions and guided using gravitational lenses. When they interact with normal matter, the results are dramatic. I noticed, Zara said dryly. But the energy requirements must be enormous. They would be using conventional power sources. But we developed fusion reactors that use a catalytic process we discovered in HFY technology. The energy output is several orders of magnitude higher than anything previously achieved. As impressive as the technology was, Zara found herself more interested in the crew themselves. The 43 humans aboard the Lucky Strike represented a remarkable cross-section of their species, with individuals from different geographical regions of their homeworld and various professional backgrounds. What united them was a sense of purpose that bordered on the fanatical. These people had volunteered for dangerous missions in hostile territory, far from their homeworld and families, driven by a shared conviction that humanity's survival depended on their success. During a meal in the ship's common area, Zara spoke with several crew members about their motivations and experiences. The stories they told painted a picture of a species that had been fundamentally transformed by their violent introduction to galactic politics. I was a university professor before the war, said Dr. Elena Rodriguez, one of the ship's xenobiologists. I studied theoretical ecology and had never been off-planet. When the HFY attacked, I watched my students being loaded onto slave ships while I hid in a damaged building. That experience taught me that knowledge without the power to protect it is worthless. Ensign Tommy Park, barely out of adolescence by human standards, had an even more personal connection to their mission. My parents were taken in the first wave of captures, he said quietly. We got them back eventually, but they were never the same. The HFY didn't just want slaves, they wanted broken slaves. I joined the Deep Space Service to make sure no other species goes through what my family did. The stories were similar throughout the crew. Each person had been personally affected by humanity's traumatic first contact, and each had channeled their trauma into a determination to prevent similar tragedies from befalling other species. It was admirable, but Zara also recognized the potential dangers of such motivation. A species driven by collective trauma could become either great protectors or terrible threats, depending on how they chose to use their newfound power. On the third day of their journey, Marcus invited her to join him in his private quarters for what he called a more detailed conversation about the current galactic situation. The captain's quarters were Spartan but comfortable, with personal items that gave Zara insights into human culture and Marcus's individual character. You've been very patient with my crew's enthusiasm for showing off our capabilities, Marcus began, pouring 2 cups of a hot beverage that smelled pleasantly of exotic spices. But I imagine you have questions about our broader intentions. Many questions, Zara agreed, accepting the cup gratefully. The liquid was hot and flavorful, with a complexity that suggested sophisticated agricultural and processing techniques. Your people have clearly achieved remarkable things in a very short time. But rapid advancement often comes with costs that aren't immediately apparent. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. You're wondering if we become so focused on military capability that we've lost sight of other values. The possibility had occurred to me. It's a fair concern. War does change people, and humanity has been essentially at war since we discovered we weren't alone in the universe. But I think our actions speak to our priorities better than our weapons do. Marcus activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of local galactic space. Red indicators marked known hegemony positions, while blue showed coalition territories. Scattered throughout were green markers that Zara didn't recognize. Over the past year, human ships have conducted 17 rescue operations in this sector alone, Marcus explained, highlighting the green markers. Merchant vessels under pirate attack, research stations threatened by raiders, civilian transports that suffered mechanical failures in dangerous space. We've saved over 3,000 lives of various species, and we've never asked for anything in return. Impressive, Zara admitted. But rescue operations also provide excellent cover for intelligence gathering. True. We are gathering intelligence, and we're not apologetic about it. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and knowledge is survival for a species like humanity that has no established alliances or territorial protections. Marcus manipulated the display to show recent hegemony movements, revealing a pattern that made Zara's scales shift to alarmed colors. But the intelligence we're gathering should concern everyone who values freedom. The hegemony isn't just expanding randomly, they're implementing a systematic campaign to destabilize the coalition and other democratic governments. The data was comprehensive and detailed, showing troop movements, supply lines, and strategic objectives that coalition intelligence would have killed for. The scope of the hegemony's plans was far larger than anything Zara had suspected. How did you acquire this information? Human ships operate in places other species consider too dangerous, Marcus replied. We've developed technologies that allow us to observe and record activities in hegemony space without being detected. What we've learned is that your encounter with their shadow fleet wasn't an isolated incident. The display showed dozens of similar attacks on coalition vessels over the past 6 months, most of which had been reported as equipment failures or accidents. The pattern was clear once properly analyzed. The hegemony was systematically eliminating coalition intelligence assets while maintaining plausible deniability. This is invaluable intelligence, Zara said, studying the data carefully. Coalition Command needs to see this immediately. They will. But I wanted you to understand the context before we make formal contact. Humanity isn't seeking to become another galactic power competing for territory and resources. We want to be part of a community of free species that can stand against threats like the hegemony. And if the coalition decides that humanity itself is a threat? Marcus was quiet for a moment, then met her eyes directly. Then, we'll defend ourselves as necessary. But we prefer to stand together against common enemies rather than create new conflicts. That evening, as the Lucky Strike prepared to enter coalition space, Zara found herself reviewing everything she had learned about humanity. They were clearly a remarkable species, combining advanced technology with strong moral principles and a fierce determination to protect both themselves and others. But they were also unpredictable in ways that would make established galactic powers nervous. Human history, as described by the crew, was filled with rapid technological advancement followed by periods of dramatic social and political change. They seemed to approach problems with a creativity that ignored conventional limitations, which could be either beneficial or dangerous depending on the circumstances. Most concerning was their apparent lack of interest in the established diplomatic and political structures that maintained galactic stability. They operated as an independent force, accountable to no one but themselves, with capabilities that could challenge any existing power. The coalition would have to decide whether humanity represented a valuable ally or a destabilizing force that needed to be contained. Zara hoped her recommendation would carry weight in that decision. "Commander," came Marcus's voice over the communication system, "we're approaching the coalition border. There's a patrol squadron moving to intercept us." Zara made her way to the bridge, where she could see the familiar outlines of coalition vessels on the main display. 3 frigates and a destroyer, probably assigned to border patrol duties in this sector. "They're hailing us," reported the communications officer. "Put them through," Marcus ordered. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Kalak of the coalition ship Steadfast. You are approaching restricted space. Identify yourself and state your intentions." Zara moved to where the communication pickup would capture her image. "Commander Kalak, this is Commander Zara Veltar of the Silent Dawn. I am aboard a friendly vessel that rescued me from hostile forces. Request permission to transfer to your ship for debriefing and transport to Coalition Command." The pause was longer than usual, probably due to surprise. "Commander Veltar, our records show the Silent Dawn was destroyed with all hands 3 days ago. The reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, Commander. I am requesting immediate transport to Command Headquarters. The information I carry is of critical importance to Coalition security." Another pause, then, "Understood, Commander. We're dispatching a shuttle to facilitate transfer. Unknown vessel, please maintain current position and do not activate any weapon systems." Marcus looked at Zara with what she was learning to recognize as human amusement. "They're being very polite about it, but those are some serious weapons aimed at us right now." "Standard procedure when encountering unknown vessels near coalition borders," Zara explained. Commander Kalak is being appropriately cautious. No offense taken. In his position, I'd do the same thing. The transfer process was completed efficiently, with Zara gathering the data Marcus had provided about hegemony activities and saying goodbye to the crew members she had come to know during the journey. As she prepared to leave the Lucky Strike, Marcus handed her a small device she didn't recognize. Communication device, he explained. If the Coalition decides they want to establish formal contact with humanity, activate this and will respond within 48 hours. And if they decide humans represent a threat? Marcus smiled, but there was steel in his expression. Then, I hope you'll remind them that we've done nothing but help people so far. But, either way, humanity isn't going back into hiding. We've learned that isolation just makes you vulnerable to the next predator that comes along. As the Coalition shuttle carried her away from the human ship, Zara watched the Lucky Strike through the viewport. It looked peaceful enough, but she now knew the devastating capabilities hidden beneath its elegant exterior. The next few hours would determine whether humanity would become the Coalition's greatest ally or their most dangerous enemy. As she prepared her report for Coalition Command, Zara hoped that wisdom would prevail over fear, and that her leaders would recognize the opportunity that Marcus Chen and his people represented. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was going to be a part of that change whether the established powers liked it or not. The only question was whether they would be partners or adversaries in the conflicts to come. The Coalition Command Center on Kepler Prime was a hive of activity when Zara arrived, but her debriefing took place in a secure conference room deep within the facility's most protected levels. Admiral Korvax, the head of Coalition Intelligence, sat across from her with an expression that had grown increasingly grim as she delivered her report. "Let me ensure I understand this correctly, Commander," the Admiral said, his deep voice carrying the authority of decades in command. "This unknown species, these humans, possess technology superior to our own, demonstrated the ability to destroy hegemony warships with minimal effort, and are currently operating throughout our space without our knowledge or permission. With respect, Admiral, they rescued me when I would have died otherwise, and they provided valuable intelligence about hegemony activities that we couldn't have obtained through conventional means." Admiral Korvax's scaled features shifted to darker hues, indicating displeasure. The Kepler Coalition was dominated by Zara's own species, the Valkyrie, but included representatives from 17 other worlds. The Admiral had been chosen for his position based on his ability to balance the concerns of multiple species while maintaining Coalition security. Their motivations may be benign, Commander, but their capabilities represent a significant potential threat. A single vessel destroying multiple hegemony cruisers suggests technological advantages that could destabilize the entire galactic balance of power. Director Yates, the Coalition's chief diplomatic officer and one of the few non-Valkyrie in the room, leaned forward in her chair. "What was your assessment of their leadership, Commander? Specifically this Captain Chen who rescued you." Zara considered her words carefully. "Captain Chen struck me as honest and principled. His crew showed similar qualities. They seemed genuinely committed to protecting innocent life and opposing what they view as tyranny." "But you have concerns," observed Dr. Thane, the Coalition's head xenopsychologist. "His species, the crystalline sherry, communicated as much through harmonic resonance as spoken words, and Zara could sense his analytical interest in the underlying frequencies of his voice." "I have questions," Zara corrected. "Humanity appears to have advanced their technology through necessity rather than gradual development. That kind of rapid change can create psychological and social stresses that might make them unpredictable." "Explain," Admiral Korvax ordered. Zara activated her personal display, showing the data Marcus had provided about hegemony activities. The humans claimed their technological leap was driven by a traumatic first contact with a slaver species called the Kethvar. They described 3 years of desperate innovation and warfare that transformed their entire civilization. Species that develop under such extreme pressure often exhibit certain behavioral patterns, Dr. Thane observed, his harmonic undertones suggesting scientific fascination. Typically including enhanced paranoia, aggressive defensive responses, and difficulty trusting potential allies. Yet their actions toward you were entirely cooperative, Director Yates pointed out. That suggests either remarkable psychological resilience or sophisticated deception capabilities. Admiral Korvax studied the intelligence data Zara had brought, his expression growing more concerned as he absorbed the scope of hegemony planning. This information about Shadow Fleet operations, if accurate, it indicates a threat level far beyond our current assessments. Captain Chen claimed human ships gathered this intelligence through covert observation of hegemony space. The detail level suggests either exceptional sensor technology or successful penetration of their communications networks. Both possibilities are concerning from a security standpoint, the Admiral noted. If humans can observe hegemony activities undetected, they can certainly do the same to us. The debate continued for several hours, with various officials weighing the potential benefits and risks of formal contact with humanity. Zara found herself defending human actions while acknowledging legitimate concerns about their capabilities and intentions. Finally, Admiral Korvax called for a recess while the senior staff consulted with their respective governments. Zara was escorted to temporary quarters while the coalition leadership debated humanity's fate. 2 days later, she was summoned back to the conference room to learn their decision. Admiral Korvax looked even more grim than before, while Director Yates appeared frustrated. Dr. Thane's harmonic patterns suggested resignation mixed with curiosity. Commander Veltar, the Admiral began formally, the Coalition Council has reached a decision regarding these humans. We have voted to invite them to formal diplomatic contact, but under carefully controlled conditions. Zara felt relief wash over her, but the Admiral's tone suggested complications. However, there was significant opposition to this decision. Several member worlds expressed concerns about humanity's military capabilities and independent operations in our space. The invitation comes with strict conditions. Director Yates took over the briefing. We're proposing a limited diplomatic exchange on the neutral station at Harmony Point. Human representatives would be allowed to present their case for alliance, but they must agree to suspend all military operations in coalition space during the negotiations. What if they refuse these conditions? Zara asked. Then, they'll be classified as a potentially hostile force, and appropriate measures will be taken, Admiral Korvax replied grimly. Zara felt her scales shift to alarmed colors. The Admiral's phrasing suggested military action, which could lead to exactly the kind of conflict everyone wanted to avoid. Admiral, with respect, humanity has demonstrated capabilities that suggest military confrontation would be costly for all parties involved. Which is precisely why we're offering diplomatic solutions first, he replied. But, the coalition cannot allow unknown forces to operate in our territory without accountability, regardless of their stated intentions. Dr. Thane's harmonic patterns shifted to indicate concern. Commander Veltar, you mentioned that Captain Chen provided you with a communication device. We'll need you to contact him and relay our offer. Zara accepted the responsibility, though she worried about how Marcus would react to what amounted to an ultimatum disguised as an invitation. Based on her conversations with him and his crew, humans didn't respond well to threats, even diplomatic ones. The communication device Marcus had given her was more sophisticated than she had initially realized. When activated, it didn't simply send a signal, instead, it opened a real-time communication channel that bypassed normal space-time limitations through principles she didn't understand. Marcus appeared on the holographic display within minutes, his expression cautious but friendly. Commander Veltar. I hope your debriefing went well. Captain Chen. I'm calling to relay an offer from Coalition Command. They've agreed to formal diplomatic contact, but there are conditions attached. She outlined the coalition's proposal, watching as Marcus's expression grew more serious. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Harmony Point is neutral territory, he said finally. That's reasonable. But, suspending all human operations in coalition space isn't something I can agree to unilaterally. You'll need to consult with your superiors? Something like that. Give me 24 hours to discuss this with the appropriate authorities. I'll contact you with our response. The communication ended, leaving Zara to worry about what humanity's appropriate authorities might decide. She had gotten the impression that human command structures were more fluid and democratic than typical military organizations, but she still didn't fully understand how their society functioned. True to his word, Marcus contacted her exactly 24 hours later. His expression was carefully neutral, but Zara thought she detected underlying tension. "Commander, humanity accepts the coalition's invitation to diplomatic contact. However, we have conditions of our own." Zara activated her recording systems, knowing that Coalition Command would want every word of this exchange. "First, the negotiations will include full disclosure of the intelligence we've gathered about hegemony activities. This information is time-sensitive and critical to galactic security." "That seems reasonable," Zara replied. "Second, we'll suspend new operations in Coalition space during negotiations, but we won't abandon ongoing humanitarian missions. If we encounter vessels in distress or civilian populations under threat, we'll respond appropriately." That was probably as much compromise as the Coalition could expect, given humanity's apparent commitment to protecting innocent life. Third, and this is non-negotiable, any attempt to use the negotiations as cover for military action against human vessels will be considered an act of war. Our ships will defend themselves with all necessary force. Zara felt her scales shift to worried colors. The threat was politely phrased but absolutely clear. "Finally, we want you to serve as the Coalition's primary liaison during these negotiations. You understand human capabilities and intentions better than anyone else in your government." "Captain, I'm honored by your confidence, but I'm not a diplomat." Marcus smiled, and Zara was reminded of the warmth and determination that had saved her life. "No, but you're honest and fair-minded, which is more important. We're not looking for political maneuvering or clever word games. We want straightforward discussions between people who respect each other." After Marcus signed off, Zara found herself once again in the position of being humanity's advocate with Coalition leadership. Admiral Corvex was displeased with the human counter-conditions, particularly the threat of military retaliation, but Director Yates argued that the terms were actually quite reasonable given the circumstances. "They're offering valuable intelligence and agreeing to limit their operations," she pointed out. "The military warning is probably just insurance against treachery." Dr. Thane's harmonic analysis was more complex. The human response pattern suggests confidence without arrogance. They're willing to negotiate but unwilling to appear weak. This is consistent with a species that has learned to equate perceived weakness with existential threat. 3 days later, the diplomatic convoy departed for Harmony Point, with Zara serving as the official Coalition liaison to humanity. The journey gave her time to prepare for what would likely be the most important diplomatic contact in recent galactic history. Harmony Point was a marvel of cooperative engineering, a massive space station built jointly by 12 different species as a neutral ground for intergovernmental negotiations. The architecture reflected the diverse aesthetic preferences of its builders, creating a unique environment that belonged to no single culture. The human delegation arrived in a ship that was somehow both elegant and intimidating, clearly built for diplomatic purposes but unmistakably capable of defending itself. Zara watched from the station's observation deck as the vessel docked, noting the sophisticated docking procedures and the obvious quality of human engineering. Marcus Chen led the human delegation, accompanied by what appeared to be representatives from various aspects of human society. Zara recognized Dr. Sarah Kim from the Lucky Strike, but the others were new to her. The formal introductions took place in the station's main conference chamber, a vast space designed to accommodate the physical requirements and cultural preferences of dozens of species. Zara found herself standing between the human and Coalition delegations, literally serving as a bridge between two groups that would determine each other's futures. "Admiral Corvex," Marcus said formally, "I am Captain Marcus Chen, representing humanity in these discussions. We appreciate the Coalition's willingness to meet with us, and we hope these talks will lead to mutual understanding and cooperation." Admiral Corvex's response was equally formal but noticeably cooler. "Captain Chen, the Coalition welcomes dialogue with your species. However, we must address concerns about human activities in our territory and the implications of your advanced technology for galactic stability." And so began the most important negotiations Zara had ever witnessed, with the future of human coalition relations hanging in the balance. As she listened to the initial exchanges, she found herself hoping that both sides would recognize the opportunity they had to forge an alliance that could benefit all free peoples in the galaxy. The alternative, a Cold War or hot conflict between humanity and the coalition, would serve only the hegemony's interests and potentially lead to the destruction of everything both sides claimed to value. The next few days would determine whether wisdom or fear would prevail in shaping the galaxy's future. The negotiations stretched on for 6 days, with both sides gradually revealing more about their capabilities, concerns, and long-term objectives. Zara found herself working almost constantly as a liaison, helping to bridge not just linguistic differences but fundamental gaps in how humans and coalition species approached diplomacy. On the third day, Dr. Elena Rodriguez presented humanity's intelligence on hegemony activities, and the revelation fundamentally changed the tone of the discussions. The scope and sophistication of the Shadow Fleet's operations shocked even Admiral Corvex, who had spent decades fighting various threats to coalition security. The pattern is unmistakable, Dr. Rodriguez explained, using holographic displays to illustrate hegemony troop movements and strategic positioning. They're not just expanding their territory, they're systematically weakening coalition defensive capabilities while building for a massive coordinated assault. Director Yates studied the data with obvious alarm. According to this timeline, they'll be ready to launch major offensive operations within 8 months. 6 months, corrected Dr. Kim. Our latest intelligence suggests they've accelerated their schedule. Recent supply convoy movements indicate preparation for immediate action. Admiral Corvex's scales had shifted to the dark colors that indicated extreme concern among the Valkyrie. How certain are you of this intelligence? Marcus stepped forward to answer. Certain enough that humanity is already repositioning our own assets to respond. We've been preparing for this possibility since we first detected the scale of their buildup. The admission created a stir around the conference table. If humans were preparing for war against the hegemony, it suggested both advanced intelligence capabilities and military resources that hadn't been previously discussed. What kind of preparations? Admiral Corvex asked carefully. The kind that assume our new friends in the coalition might need assistance, Marcus replied diplomatically. Humanity learned early that standing alone against overwhelming force is rarely a winning strategy. Dr. Thane's harmonic pattern shifted to indicate intense curiosity. You're suggesting a military alliance against the hegemony? I'm suggesting that free species have a responsibility to protect each other against tyranny, Marcus clarified. The specific form that protection takes depends on what each party can contribute and what threatens them most. The discussions that followed revealed the true scope of humanity's capabilities for the first time. What had seemed like an advanced but limited force was actually a sophisticated military organization with resources distributed throughout local galactic space. We currently operate 47 vessels of various types, admitted Admiral Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister and the head of human naval operations. 12 are dedicated combat vessels like the Lucky Strike, while the others serve reconnaissance, support, and humanitarian functions. The numbers were smaller than coalition fleets, but the technological advantages more than compensated for the difference in quantity. A single human combat vessel could apparently engage multiple enemy ships simultaneously, while their reconnaissance capabilities were clearly superior to anything the coalition possessed. More importantly, human strategic thinking seemed to be several steps ahead of both coalition and hegemony planning. They had anticipated the current crisis and positioned themselves to respond effectively, while also maintaining the flexibility to support allies or operate independently as circumstances required. On the 5th day, the negotiations took an unexpected turn when emergency alerts began sounding throughout Harmony Point. A hegemony battle fleet had emerged from hyperspace near the station, demanding the immediate surrender of the terrorist vessel harboring enemies of the state. Zara rushed to the command center along with both delegations, where they found station security frantically trying to understand what was happening. Through the main viewports, they could see the angular black hulls of hegemony warships surrounding the neutral station. "This is Admiral Threck of the Hegemony Fleet Command," came a transmission directed at the station. "We demand the immediate surrender of the human terrorists who have been conducting illegal operations in sovereign hegemony space." Marcus and Admiral Korvax exchanged glances, both recognizing the implications. The hegemony had somehow learned about the negotiations and decided to force a confrontation that would prevent any potential alliance between humanity and the coalition. "Admiral Threk," responded Commander Jackson, the station's commanding officer, "Harmony Point is neutral territory under the protection of the Galactic Accords. Your vessels are in violation of interstellar law." "The Galactic Accords do not protect terrorists and pirates," Threk replied coldly. "Surrender the humans, or we will take them by force." The threat was clear. The hegemony was prepared to violate the neutrality of Harmony Point to prevent human coalition cooperation. It was a calculated risk that demonstrated how seriously they viewed the potential threat of such an alliance. Marcus stepped to the communication console, his expression grim but determined. "Admiral Threk, this is Captain Marcus Chen. If you want us, you'll have to take us. But I should mention that attacking a neutral station filled with civilians would make you a war criminal even by hegemony standards. Your concern for civilian lives is noted, terrorist. You have 1 hour to surrender before we begin boarding operations." As the channel closed, chaos erupted in the command center. Coalition and human officers began discussing defensive options, while station security tried to coordinate with multiple governments to resolve the crisis diplomatically. Admiral Korvax pulled Zara aside during the confusion. "Commander, this is exactly what we were afraid of. Human presence has already destabilized the regional balance and drawn us into conflict with the hegemony." "Admiral, the hegemony was planning to attack us anyway," Zara replied, gesturing to the intelligence displays that still showed human data about Shadow Fleet operations. "The only difference is now we have warning and potential allies." Before the Admiral could respond, Marcus appeared beside them. "Admiral, I need to discuss something with you privately. The situation may not be as hopeless as it appears." The three of them moved to a secure conference room, where Marcus activated a portable communication device that Zara hadn't seen before. The display showed tactical information about the surrounding space, including detailed scans of the hegemony fleet. 12 heavy cruisers, 4 destroyers, and a battleship, Marcus summarized. Formidable, but not insurmountable. Admiral Korvax stared at him in disbelief. "Captain, that fleet could destroy this entire station and everyone aboard it. What are you suggesting?" Marcus smiled with the same confidence Zara had seen when he engaged the Shadow Fleet. "I'm suggesting that the hegemony may have made a tactical error. They came here expecting to intimidate civilians and capture a few humans. They didn't come prepared to fight the entire human deep space fleet." As if summoned by his words, new contacts began appearing on the tactical display. Human vessels were emerging from hyperspace throughout the system, their arrival coordinated with military precision. "The lucky strike was never alone out here," Marcus explained as more ships appeared. "Humanity doesn't send single vessels into hostile territory without backup. We've been operating in this region for months, and most of our fleet is within rapid response distance." Within minutes, 23 human vessels had taken position around Harmony Point, their exotic technology creating sensor readings that clearly confused the hegemony commanders. The balance of force had shifted dramatically in humanity's favor. Admiral Korvax studied the display with a mixture of awe and concern. "You planned this." "We prepared for it," Marcus corrected. "The hegemony has been increasingly aggressive toward anyone who opposes their expansion. We knew they would eventually try to prevent us from forming alliances with other free peoples." The communication channel reopened, revealing Admiral Threk's angular helmet but none of his previous confidence. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves and withdraw from this system immediately." This time, Admiral Sarah Chen answered from the human flagship. "Admiral Threk, this is Admiral Chen of the Human Space Force. You have threatened civilians at a neutral facility and demanded the surrender of our personnel. Withdraw your forces immediately, or face the consequences. The hegemony does not retreat from terrorist threats." Then, the hegemony is about to learn why that's a mistake. What followed was the most one-sided space battle Zara had ever witnessed. The human fleet moved with mechanical precision, their advanced targeting systems and exotic weapons systematically dismantling hegemony vessels that had seemed invincible just minutes before. The engagement lasted less than an hour, ending with most of the hegemony fleet destroyed and the survivors fleeing toward their own territory. Not a single human vessel suffered significant damage, while Harmony Point remained completely unharmed throughout the battle. As the tactical display showed the retreating hegemony ships, Admiral Corvex turned to Marcus with an expression Zara couldn't quite read. "Captain Chen, your fleet just destroyed a major hegemony battle group without breaking a sweat. What exactly are humanity's total military capabilities?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, then seemed to reach a decision about how much to reveal. "Admiral, the ships you just saw represent about 30% of our current operational capacity. The rest are positioned throughout local galactic space, gathering intelligence and protecting civilians from various threats." The implications were staggering. If this demonstration represented only a fraction of human military power, then humanity was potentially the most formidable force in the galaxy. The coalition leadership would need to completely reassess their strategic planning and diplomatic priorities. "The question now," Marcus continued, "is whether the coalition wants humanity as an ally or whether you'll try to contain us as a potential threat. Because the hegemony isn't going to give you the luxury of neutrality much longer." Dr. Thane's harmonic patterns indicated intense analysis. "The hegemony attack on this station represents a fundamental shift in their strategic approach. They're now willing to violate neutral territory to prevent anti-hegemony alliances. Which means the coalition has to choose," Admiral Corvex said grimly. "Stand with humanity against the hegemony, or face them both as potential enemies." Director Yates had been silent throughout the crisis, but now she spoke with obvious conviction. "There's really no choice at all. Humanity has demonstrated both the capability and the willingness to protect civilians and oppose tyranny. The coalition would be foolish not to accept them as allies." The formal signing of the Human Coalition Mutual Defense Treaty took place 3 days later, in the same conference room where the negotiations had begun. Zara found herself serving as one of the witnesses to an agreement that would reshape galactic politics for decades to come. The treaty was comprehensive, covering military cooperation, intelligence sharing, trade agreements, and protocols for humanitarian operations. Most importantly, it established humanity as a full partner in the coalition of free peoples opposing hegemony expansion. As she watched Marcus and Admiral Corvex affix their signatures to the document, Zara reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. She had begun as a dying reconnaissance officer trapped in a damaged ship, saved by the kindness of a stranger who risked everything to help someone in need. Now she was witnessing the formation of an alliance that might be the galaxy's best hope for preserving freedom and justice against the forces of tyranny and oppression. "Commander Veltar," Marcus said as the ceremony concluded, "I want to thank you for giving humanity a fair hearing when many of your colleagues were inclined toward suspicion and fear. Captain Chen, you and your people earned that fair hearing through your actions, not my advocacy. Perhaps. But your voice carried weight because you spoke from direct experience rather than theoretical concerns. That made all the difference." As the various delegations prepared to return to their home territories, Zara found herself looking